She never told you her secrets. Your mother, your grandmother, she kept them hidden behind a simple wooden door, tucked away in the quiet shadows of the kitchen. But step inside that pantry, and you'd discover a world most people never understood. A world of glass jars lined up like soldiers, canned goods stacked with military precision, and tricks so clever they could make $1 stretch until Friday. This wasn't just about food. This was survival. This was love. This was the invisible language of an entire generation of American women who knew how to turn almost nothing into everything their families needed. What did she keep on those shelves that we've completely forgotten today? What did she know that we never learned? And why did that small, sacred space matter so much more than anyone ever said out loud? Today, we're opening that door. We're stepping back into the 1950s, into the heart of the American home, to uncover the pantry secrets your grandmother never quite explained, the hidden habits, the clever tricks, the quiet pride, and the beautiful, heartbreaking truth behind every carefully arranged shelf. Stay with us, because what you're about to discover isn't just about the past. It's about the part of ourselves we left behind on those shelves, waiting to be remembered. But before we unlock these forgotten secrets together, do me one favor. If this feels familiar, if you remember these shelves or the woman who kept them, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because these stories, they deserve to be told. They deserve to be remembered. Now, let's step inside. There was a sacred space in every American home during the 1950s. Not the living room with its new television set, not the porch where neighbors gathered on summer evenings, but a smaller, quieter place that told the real story of who lived there, the pantry. Step inside one on any given morning, and you'd find yourself transported into a world of careful order, humble abundance, and unspoken devotion. The light filtered through gingham curtains, catching dust motes that danced above rows of identical glass jars, mason jars, ball jars, repurposed pickle jars with their labels soaked off and scrubbed clean until they gleamed. Each one held something precious, flour as white as fresh snow, sugar that caught the light like tiny crystals, dried beans in shades of cream and burgundy that clicked softly when you moved them. The lids were always tight, always checked, because waste was a sin no woman of that generation would willingly commit. The shelves themselves spoke of permanence. Often they were simple wood painted white or lined with cheerful contact paper, featuring cherries or daisies or geometric patterns that made opening the pantry door feel like unveiling something special. Everything had its place. The tallest items stood in back, bottles of Karo syrup, vinegar in its clear glass vessel, vanilla extract that cost more than most folks liked to admit. Shorter cans marched forward in perfect formation, their labels facing out like soldiers at attention. Campbell's soup, Del Monte vegetables, Dole pineapple chunks in heavy syrup. A woman could reach for exactly what she needed without looking, her hands knowing the geography of that space as intimately as her own face in the mirror. The smells layered themselves into memory. Cinnamon and nutmeg lived on the spice shelf, tucked into little red-capped tins that bore the McCormick name like a promise. Ground cloves for ham at Easter, allspice for the apple pies that appeared every Sunday. Whole peppercorns in the small glass bottle because pre-ground pepper was something only lazy housewives used, or so the magazines suggested. Below that, the earthy scent of potatoes kept in a wooden bin, their skins still carrying traces of soil from the grocery store, or the victory garden out back that some families still tended, unable to shake the habits of wartime necessity. The canned goods section told its own story about life in post-war America. Rows of vegetables that no one had to grow, shell, blanch, or preserve themselves anymore. Green beans, whole kernel corn, early June peas. The labels were bright and optimistic, featuring illustrations of perfect produce that suggested abundance and ease. Women who had spent the war years rationing sugar and saving fat could now walk into an A&P or Piggly Wiggly and fill their carts without counting ration stamps. The pantry became proof of that freedom, even as old habits of thrift lingered in every carefully considered purchase. Boxes of Jell-O occupied their own special territory, their flavors reading like a paint sample card: strawberry, lime, lemon, orange, cherry, raspberry. They cost pennies and could be transformed into elaborate molded salads that graced dinner tables and church potlucks with architectural ambition. Next to them, packages of cake mix announced that baking could be simpler now. Betty Crocker, Duncan Hines, Pillsbury. Just add eggs and oil, the boxes promised, though many women still viewed them with suspicion, adding their own touches to prove they hadn't taken the easy way out. The baking shelf held its own quiet dignity. Bisquick for emergency biscuits and impossible pies. Crisco in its blue can with the lid that popped off to reveal shortening white as fresh linen. Swan's down cake flour for the lightest layers. Baking powder, baking soda, cornstarch in its distinctive yellow box. These were the tools of transformation, the ingredients that turned humble raw materials into birthday cakes and Sunday dinners, and the bake sale offerings that proved a woman's worth in the community. There was pride in a well-stocked pantry, not the loud, boastful kind, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing your family wouldn't go hungry, that you could produce a meal at any moment, that you were prepared for whatever came next. When neighbors stopped by unexpectedly, a glance at the pantry shelves brought confidence. You could offer coffee and something sweet. You could invite them to stay for supper. The pantry was a woman's insurance policy against chaos, against judgment, against the unpredictability of life in a world that was changing faster than anyone could quite comprehend. But behind those orderly shelves lay secrets that only the housewives themselves truly understood. Tricks and techniques passed from mother to daughter, learned through trial and error, whispered between friends over coffee at the kitchen table. The pantry wasn't just about what you kept. It was about how you made things last, how you stretched every dollar, how you transformed the ordinary into something that felt like plenty. The glass jars held more than dry goods. They held the summer itself, captured and sealed for winter use. Strawberry preserves made from berries picked at the height of June, their sweetness still somehow tasting of sunshine when spread on toast during February snowstorms. Bread and butter pickles, dill spears, pickled beets that turned eggs magenta for deviled egg platters. Tomatoes canned whole with a sprig of basil, their acidity carefully balanced with a pinch of sugar. These jars represented hours of work, the heat of the kitchen in August, the steam from the canning pot, the anxiety of waiting to hear each lid seal with its satisfying pop. Women who had learned these skills during the Depression and refined them during the war couldn't simply stop when prosperity arrived. Their hands remembered, even when abundance made the work seem unnecessary. The brown paper bags folded flat behind the pantry door served a dozen purposes. Lined with wax paper, they became lunch sacks for children and working husbands. Cut into strips, they protected shelves. Crumpled, they started fires in the furnace. Some women wrote their grocery lists directly on these bags, recycling them one final time before they went to heat the house or line the trash bin. Waxed paper itself was a marvel. It preserved sandwiches, wrapped cheese, covered rising dough, created disposable surfaces for rolling cookies. Every sheet was used twice if possible, wiped clean and saved for another day. The war had taught lessons that peacetime couldn't erase. Fat drippings never went down the drain. They accumulated in coffee cans or ceramic crocks kept near the stove, ready to fry potatoes or make the flakiest pie crusts. Bacon grease, chicken fat, even the rendered fat from a Sunday roast, all of it was gold. Butter wrappers got saved too, their thin coating of residual fat perfect for greasing pans or buttering corn on the cob with a single swipe. These weren't the habits of poverty anymore, but of principle. A woman who wasted food had failed at her most fundamental duty. The magazines reinforced these values even as they sold convenience. Ladies' Home Journal, Good Housekeeping, Woman's Day. They arrived each month with glossy photographs of impossibly elaborate gelatin molds and 7-layer cakes. But their columns also featured penny-wise recipes that showed how to use every leftover, how to make hamburger into 6 different meals, how to revive stale bread into stuffing or bread pudding. The advertisements played both sides, too. Buy this new instant pudding to save time. Buy this canned soup to create the casseroles that would make your family happy. But also, buy in bulk, stock up, be prepared. The message was contradictory but clear. Be modern, but don't forget where you came from. Certain items became symbols of sophistication for women reaching toward middle-class aspiration. Canned pineapple wasn't practical. It was exotic, a taste of Hawaii that most would never visit. It went into upside-down cakes and ham glazes and fruit cocktails served in crystal bowls at Bridge Club. Minute rice saved time, but also made you modern, efficient, part of the streamlined future. TV dinners in their compartmented aluminum trays represented the ultimate in convenience, though most women served them only when exhausted or when the novelty itself was the point. The pantry held these contradictions without judgment, tradition and innovation, thrift and aspiration, all sharing the same shelves. Spices told migration stories. Italian families kept dried oregano and basil, tins of olive oil that were still exotic in many American kitchens. German households stocked caraway and dill seed. Mexican-American women maintained chili powder and cumin, even as Anglo neighbors viewed these flavors with suspicion. The mainstream American pantry, though, defaulted to a narrow band of safety: salt, pepper, garlic powder perhaps, and those baking spices that reminded everyone of grandmother's kitchen. Adventurous meant adding paprika for color, or a bay leaf to the stew. Storage was an art form governed by unwritten rules. Potatoes and onions never touched. Everyone knew that. Flour got sifted, even when it said pre-sifted, because you couldn't trust that completely. Cracker bags were folded over and clipped tight against humidity. Crackers went into tins immediately after opening because stale saltines were an embarrassment to serve with soup. Some women kept inventory lists on the inside of the pantry door, pencil marks tracking what needed replenishing, numbers adjusted each time something got used. It was a system of constant attention, constant maintenance, constant care. The bottom shelf often held what couldn't go elsewhere: root vegetables in paper bags, squash that would keep for months in cool darkness, large containers of staples bought on sale, 10-pound bags of flour or sugar that represented real savings if you had the space to store them. The floor itself might host a sack of potatoes, a basket of onions, the recycling that hadn't made it outside yet. This was the practical level, the one that didn't have to look pretty because it was about survival, not presentation. But what did all of this really mean? Why did a closet full of canned goods and carefully arranged jars matter so much to women whose daughters would eventually question every choice they made? The answer lived somewhere deeper than recipes or household economy, in a place where emotion and duty tangled together into something that looked like love. A full pantry meant security in a world that had proven itself uncertain. These women had lived through economic collapse and world war. They had seen loved ones leave and not return. They had learned that circumstances could shift without warning, that comfort could disappear overnight, that preparation was the only defense against chaos. The pantry was their fortress against hunger, embarrassment, and the particular terror of not being able to provide. When shelves were stocked, when jars were sealed, when everything had its place, a woman could breathe slightly easier. She had done her job. Her family was safe, at least for now. There was control, too, and a life that offered women precious little of it. She might not choose where they lived, or how her husband spent his money, or what the world expected of her, but the pantry was hers. She decided what went on which shelf, what to buy and when, what to make for dinner. This small dominion offered a sense of competence and authority that extended nowhere else in her life. The pantry was proof she could manage, could plan, could create order from chaos. Its very existence argued that she mattered, that her work had value, that her constant, invisible labor held the household together. The food itself carried memory and meaning that transcended nutrition. The bread and butter pickles tasted like her grandmother's recipe, the one that came over from the old country. The strawberry jam recalled summer days with her own children, their faces sticky with berry juice, their laughter mixing with the sound of jars processing in the boiling water. Opening a can of cream of mushroom soup meant another night when she would combine it with chicken and rice into the casserole everyone ate without complaint. The reliable meal that asked nothing of her beyond competence. Every item was a small story, every shelf a chapter in the ongoing narrative of family life. And it was love, even if that word seems too simple. What else do you call the act of standing in a hot kitchen in August to can tomatoes for January? What else explains the careful attention to making sure there were enough of the crackers her husband preferred, the cereal her children would eat, the ingredients for the cake that would make a birthday feel special? The pantry was an act of continuous provision, of thinking ahead, of imagining the future needs of people she cared about, and taking action now to meet them. It was labor that went unnoticed unless she failed, that never ended, that offered no days off. But it was also the language she had been taught to speak when saying, "I love you," felt too vulnerable or too bold. Today's world has forgotten these things, or perhaps rejected them. We buy what we need when we need it, waste what we don't finish, view abundance as a given rather than something to be carefully maintained. The pantry, when it exists at all, holds snacks and impulse purchases, rather than the carefully curated inventory of a household manager. We've lost the language of preservation, the knowledge of how to make things last, the deep satisfaction of looking at full shelves and knowing you're prepared. Maybe we've gained something in that loss. Freedom from endless labor, from the pressure to prove our worth through domestic perfection, from the constraint of being defined solely by how well we feed our families. But something real was lost too, something about connection to the sources of our food, about the value of planning and care, about the small pride that comes from competence in daily tasks. Those 1950s pantries were never really about the food, not entirely. They were about creating something lasting in a temporary world, about maintaining standards when everything felt uncertain, about the quiet heroism of daily maintenance. They were about women who had learned to stretch and save and make do, finding themselves in an era of unprecedented abundance, but unable to shake the habits of scarcity. They were about the particular way that generation expressed devotion, not through words or grand gestures, but through endless small acts of provision and care. The shelves are different now. The jars have been replaced by plastic containers or nothing at all. The careful rotation of canned goods has given way to whatever catches our eye at the store. The skills have faded. Most of us could not can a tomato or render fat, or make a week of meals from what we have on hand if we had to. But for those who remember, opening a pantry door can still bring back that feeling. The cool darkness, the smell of cinnamon and coffee, the sight of everything in its place. And with it, the memory of women who spoke their love in the language of full shelves and sealed jars, who built their small fortresses against uncertainty, who kept their families fed through nothing more miraculous than attention and care and the determination to make enough be plenty. And so the door closes. The shelves remain, at least in memory, those rows of glass jars catching the afternoon light, the labels facing forward, everything in its place, a language of love written in canned goods and careful planning, a fortress built from flour and faith. Maybe you remember opening that pantry door as a child, standing on tiptoes to reach the cookie tin your grandmother kept on the second shelf. Maybe you remember the smell,
cinnamon and coffee and something earthy you could never quite name. Or maybe you remember watching her hands, how they moved with such certainty, always knowing exactly where everything belonged. Those women kept their secrets well. They worked in silence, loved in silence, built their small worlds behind closed doors, while the rest of the house hummed with noise and life. They asked for so little. They gave everything they had. And now, most of those pantries are gone, dismantled when estates were settled, emptied when homes were sold, forgotten as the world rushed forward into easier, faster, lonelier ways of living. But the memory remains. If you close your eyes, you can still see it, you can still smell it, you can still feel what it meant to be loved by a woman who spoke in the language of full shelves and sealed jars. So here's what I want to know, and I really want to hear from you on this one. What's the one thing you remember most from your mother's or grandmother's pantry? Was it a specific item she always kept, a smell, a secret she taught you? Or maybe something you wish you had asked her about before it was too late? Leave your memory in the comments below. Let's fill this space with those stories, because they matter. She mattered. And maybe, just maybe, someone else needs to hear your story today. If this brought back memories, if you felt something watching this, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who understands, someone who remembers those shelves, those hands, that quiet devotion. And subscribe to this channel, because we're not done remembering. We're not done honoring the women who built their worlds one carefully stocked shelf at a time. There are more stories to tell, more secrets to uncover, more moments that deserve to be pulled out of the shadows and into the light. Thank you for stepping into that pantry with me today. Thank you for remembering with me. Until next time, keep those memories alive.